Hi, boys and girls. I'm your Peter Pan storyteller. And when you hear this sound, turn the page. Now let's read along together. The Ghostbusters meet the Ghost Riders.
Ghostbusters, Ghostbusters, spirits in the night. Ghostbusters, Ghostbusters, something here ain't right. Ghostbusters, Ghostbusters, makes you wanna scream. Ghostbusters, Ghostbusters, get a Ghostbusting machine.
Hello, Dr. Peter Venkman speaking.
The phone had been ringing for almost a full minute, but Peter was so engrossed in his laboratory work that he failed to hear its shrill, monotonous sound. It was only when he took his eyes from his kinetic energy reading that he realized what was happening.
Dr. Venkman, this is Sandy Dunes calling from Minersville, Colorado. If we've got a little problem here you might be interested in.
There's only one kind of problem that interests me right now, Mr. Dunes. Ghost problems.
That's what I'm calling about, Dr. Venkman. We've got a town full of them. Minersville is a ghost town, in the truest sense of the word.
Have you actually seen them, Mr. Dunes?
Asked Peter, trying to sound calm.
At least 10 of them that I know of personally. My neighbor's boy, little Mel Richmond, says he's seen about 5 more.
Well, it certainly sounds like something's out there. Better give me directions. We'll be taking the ectomobile. That should be about a 3-day drive. And by the way,
Peter added,
thanks for calling Ghostbusters.
The trip to Minersville was uneventful and fast, with Dr. Raymond Stans, Egon Spengler, and Peter helping Winston Zedmore with the driving. However, the closer they got to their destination, the more treacherous the road became, narrow, winding, and mountainous. The 4 Ghostbusters arrived in Minersville at exactly 3 minutes to midnight. Exactly, according to Raymond's watch, 3 days and 3 hours after Sandy Dunes' urgent call. The silvery Colorado moon allowed them to see the silhouette of the mountains and the mesas surrounding the town as clearly as if it were dusk. It also allowed them to see something else that caught them quite by surprise. At least 100 head of steer being herded by 24 cowboys. The thundering hooves of cattle and horses were almost drowned out by the eerie wailing and whistling of the riders. Ghost riders were chasing a ghost herd.
We're looking at something rare, gentlemen,
said Peter to the other 3.
Plain cowboys who are riding on an otherworld plane. The etheric plane. The realm of the spirits. If the readings are correct, as I'm sure they are,
he continued, looking at his physical variance monitoring machine,
we're looking at a ghost herd chased by ghost riders in this charming little ghost town.
A bouncing yellow light coming toward them in the distance distracted them from the awesome sight they had just seen. The light that started as a tiny dot grew larger and larger with each passing second. Not moving, the Ghostbusters watched carefully as it headed right for the ectomobile. Within minutes, the light loomed in front of their eyes, temporarily blinding them.
Welcome to Minersville,
shouted a voice from behind the gleam. Peter at once recognized the twangy voice of Sandy Dunes.
Mr. Dunes, if you'd remove the light from our eyes, we'd really feel a little more comfortable.
Mr. Dunes apologized and immediately clicked off his lantern. As their eyes readjusted to the darkness, they saw the lanky shape of Sandy Dunes astride a squat mule.
That accounts for the bouncing light,
whispered Egon.
Did you see them?
Shouted Mr. Dunes.
I never saw as many as the bunch that passed by tonight, and I never saw the cattle before either.
Do they always come about this time?
Asked Raymond.
He means about midnight,
added Winston.
Sometimes a little before, sometimes a little after, sometimes right on the button. There is no set schedule. Follow me to my cabin. While you get yourself settled in, I'll tell you the whole story.
From what the Ghostbusters could make of Minersville in the dark, it was a typical deserted mining town. There were about 15 to 20 ramshackle cabins, a general store, a blacksmith shop, and a saloon.
The mining must have been done on the outskirts of town.
Peter said, looking around.
I don't see anything that looks like mines or equipment around here.
If they mined for silver, which they probably did, this being Colorado, it would have to be in those mountains there.
Raymond pointed. When they started settling in for the night, they understood the story a little better. According to Sandy Dunes, there were only 3 cabins occupied in Minersville. His next-door neighbors, the Richmonds, and an old miner called Billy Fish, who had his cabin close to the now-defunct Taurus mine. The Richmonds and Sandy, it turns out, were friends in Boulder, Colorado. They heard about Minersville from Billy Fish, who came to Boulder looking for a friend of his who had once lived in the house that Sandy occupied. It was an old story. The big silver mine, the Taurus, was closed up because it wasn't producing. Everyone in the town moved away, seeking other ways to make their fortune. Everyone but Billy. He believed there was still a lot of silver left, but he needed stake money for equipment and a couple of extra hands to help him mine. What convinced Sandy and Mr. Richmond was the hunk of ore Billy showed them.
Now, boys and girls, turn the recording over.
When did the ghosts start showing up? Asked Dr. Egon Spengler excitedly.
About 2 months ago, when we got here.
Was this always a mining town, or was it cattle-raising country before?
Questioned Peter.
Cattle country for years, the way I understand it. The cattlemen were driven out by the miners.
That explains it.
Said Raymond, half shouting.
Those ghostly cowboys are still trying to drive out the miners. You, Mr. Richmond, and Billy Fish.
He said, pointing to Sandy.
Tomorrow night at midnight, we start busting some ghosts. But tonight, let's sleep.
The plan was simple. They would start working in the mine around 11 p.m. and make enough noise to attract the ghost riders. We'll have to wake the dead, laughed Winston.
Our noise will attract them into the mine, where our lasers will do the rest,
said Peter confidently. The noise of the hammering in the mine could be heard for miles. At the stroke of midnight, another noise, much louder, could be heard in the distance. The approaching ghost riders were whistling and wailing as they approached. The breath of the horses on this chilly night looked like campfire smoke, and the gleam in their eyes like burning embers. The ghosts whooped and hollered around the entrance of the mine for a good 5 minutes or so. The only word the 7 could make out was an eerie, shiver-causing... With the miners waiting deep inside the mine, the Ghostbusters showed themselves at the entrance. It was only natural that the cowboys would pursue them. As soon as all entered, the entire mine lit up with the crossfire of laser beams. It was all over in a matter of minutes.
Well, I'll be.
Smiled Sandy Dunes.
We should be thankful to those ghosts. Look here. The laser beams broke off this layer of rock, and this sure looks like the mother lode we've been looking for.
Well, this is a first,
laughed Peter.
It looks like the Ghostbusters got more than ghosts this time. We've got a silver mine.
Ghostbusters, Ghostbusters, spirits in the night. Ghostbusters, Ghostbusters, something to right. Ghostbusters, Ghostbusters, makes you want to scream. Ghostbusters, Ghostbusters, get a Ghostbusting machine.
If you hear a noise late at night, the tables move from left to right. Pictures fall right off the wall. You've got the ghost. They're big and small. And if you want to chase them out, 'cause they're not just a dream, go out now, don't you delay. Get a Ghostbusting machine.
Ghostbusters, Ghostbusters, spirits in the night. Ghostbusters, Ghostbusters,
something here ain't right.
Ghostbusters, Ghostbusters, makes you want to scream. Ghostbusters, Ghostbusters, get a Ghostbusting machine.
here and they're flying there. Sometimes on a broom. Scaring people, that's their job. Some of them are really mean. The only way to get them out is with a Ghostbusting machine.
Ghostbusters, Ghostbusters, spirits in the night. Ghostbusters, Ghostbusters,
Something here ain't right.
woo! Ghostbusters, Ghostbusters, makes you wanna scream. Ghostbusters, Ghostbusters, get it, Ghostbusting machine. Ghostbusters, Ghostbusters, spirits in the night. Ghostbusters, Ghostbusters,
Something here ain't right.
woo!